Most survival plans are built on gear, food, ammo, and checklists. The kind of stuff that's easy to see, easy to touch, and easy to control. People get really good at stacking buckets, running drills, fine-tuning their bug-out bags, and installing security cameras. And while all of that absolutely matters, it's also exactly what distracts most folks from what's coming next. The one thing that doesn't sit on a shelf, doesn't run on batteries, and can't be solved with a YouTube tutorial, and that's people. Human beings, emotions, conflict, desperation. The part of collapse that most preppers completely overlook isn't what's outside your home. It's what's already inside it, or what shows up begging at the door. And when things really start to break down, when the system collapses, and you're trapped inside your home with no power, no help, and a small group of people who are scared, hungry, and watching the world fall apart, that's when the real survival test begins. So in this video, we're digging into the missing piece, the one factor that can't be stored, but absolutely must be prepared for, because gear doesn't save you from people. And if your plan doesn't account for human nature under pressure, it's not a survival plan. It's a setup for failure. Make sure you stick around to the end, and if you haven't already, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and become a member to unlock a wealth of new information that will help you stay ahead of what's coming. Because what I'm about to say might be the difference between a plan that works and a plan that crumbles. Every prepper loves their gear, and for good reason, because when systems fail, your gear can absolutely keep you alive. But what it can't do is keep the people around you sane, loyal, honest, or moral. And the reality is, most people out there have never practiced self-control without some form of authority watching them. And when that authority collapses, when there's no 911, no police, no courts, no HR department, no social pressure, what's underneath starts to show. And that's when gear just becomes a tool in the hands of whoever has the strongest emotions or the most influence in the room. You might have a $3,000 rifle, but if your group falls into paranoia and finger-pointing, that rifle might end up pointed at you. You could have a basement full of food and medical supplies, but if your spouse mentally unravels or your teenage kids start sneaking out and talking to strangers, that prepper goldmine could turn into a powder keg. We don't like to think about this part because it's uncomfortable. It's not sexy, and it doesn't look good on Instagram, but it's the part that turns a crisis into a catastrophe. People are emotional, unpredictable, and influenced by fear more than logic. And when that fear kicks in, you can forget your SOPs and your bug-in protocols and your laminated playbooks, because everything changes the moment someone cracks. And if your plan is built around the assumption that people will stay rational, calm, and loyal during weeks of chaos, hunger, isolation, and stress, you're not planning for collapse, you're daydreaming. There's this huge blind spot in the prepping world where people talk endlessly about disasters and events and systems breaking down, but they almost never talk about what happens to the people around them during those events. And that's what I mean when I say, you're not just prepping for the collapse, you're prepping for people in collapse. And people don't just run out of food and power, they run out of patience, out of hope, out of sanity, and out of emotional control. And when that happens, you're going to be dealing with breakdowns that no flashlight or water filter can fix. Think about the average modern person. They've lived their whole life with comfort, distraction, and structure. And when those things are gone, they start to emotionally spiral. They argue, they isolate, they blame, they cry, they shut down, or worse, they lash out. And if you're stuck in a house or a small building with them during that process, your survival is tied to their mental state, whether you like it or not. Prepping isn't just about food and water. It's about behavior, trust, roles, expectations, and coping mechanisms. And if you haven't accounted for how people will react under prolonged stress, then your plan is missing the most dangerous variable of all. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. The threat is often not out there, somewhere. It's sitting across from you at the dinner table on day 17 of no power, no news, and nothing but dried beans left. And that's when things start to crack. This is where most people fold. Not because they didn't prep enough gear, but because they weren't emotionally ready for the choices collapse demands from you. And I'm talking about the moments that keep you awake at night, when someone you know comes to the door with their kids, with nothing, and they're looking at you like you're their last hope. and you're standing there knowing that every bite you share might be the bite your own family needs in 10 days. And that's the kind of moral torture most people have never even considered, let alone prepared for. You'll be tested emotionally when someone you trusted starts losing it, or when the people you counted on start withdrawing. Stop talking, start accusing, and suddenly the atmosphere in your home isn't survival, it's suspicion. And socially, you're going to deal with dynamics you never expected. Power struggles, jealousy, groupthink, and manipulation. Especially if your group is mixed, like friends, family, or people who were thrown together because they had nowhere else to go. This is when leadership starts to matter, not as a title, but as an ability to keep things steady when people want to explode. And if you're not emotionally ready for those tests, no amount of tactical training is going to help you. Most people will fail the moment survival turns into sacrifice. And if you haven't walked through those scenarios in your head, or better yet with your group, then you're going to learn the hard way that prepping isn't about stuff. It's about strength. And that kind of strength isn't measured in calories or calibers. It's measured in choices. Even the strongest looking groups can fall apart fast when collapse stretches into weeks. And it doesn't happen because people suddenly become evil. It happens because the pressure builds slowly, and then something small cracks the surface. And from there it spreads like rot, because when food runs low, when people are tired and scared and feeling powerless, trust becomes a luxury, and suspicion starts to fill the gaps. Somebody takes more than their share, someone hides a stash, someone snaps at the wrong moment, and suddenly everyone's wondering who's really on their side, and it doesn't matter if you all started with the same plan. Once that trust is gone, the entire structure collapses, and it becomes every man for himself. I've seen it happen in tight-knit families, in church groups, in veteran teams. It only takes one seed of doubt, one lie, one panic reaction, and the sense of us becomes a fractured mess of me versus them. If you don't have a plan for managing conflict, for mediating disagreements, for establishing clear leadership and fair systems of resource sharing, then you're going to end up trying to survive not just against the outside world, but against the people you're stuck inside with. That's what most people miss. They think the danger is outside the door, when in reality collapse turns people inward. And if your group's internal trust is weak, the whole thing becomes a slow-motion implosion. You can't stop once it starts. Everyone's got a plan for food, water, power, and defense. But almost no one has a plan for what to do when people start unraveling. And that's where everything usually falls apart, because it's not the lack of resources that destroys most survival groups. It's the lack of structure and the lack of emotional clarity when things go sideways. If your plan doesn't include ground rules for behavior, expectations for how decisions get made, and contingency plans for conflict, then you're not running a group. You're hosting a time bomb. You need to decide now who makes decisions, how disputes get settled, what happens if someone breaks trust or refuses to cooperate, and how you're going to manage mental health when people start breaking down under stress. And yeah, it feels weird to talk about that stuff ahead of time, especially with family or friends. But I promise you, it feels way worse to deal with it in the moment when everything's already falling apart. This is where a lot of preppers miss the mark. They think planning means gear and maps, but real planning is talking through what happens when your brother refuses to take watch, or when your daughter wants to let a stranger in, or when someone starts hiding food. And if you haven't had those conversations, your group is going to be improvising under pressure. And that's when mistakes get made that can't be undone. So yeah, prep your gear, but prep your people too. Because no matter how strong your walls are, if there's chaos inside them, you're not safe. Now here's the part nobody wants to deal with. What happens when people show up, and they're not enemies exactly, but they're not part of your group either, and they're hungry, desperate, maybe with kids, maybe with tears in their eyes, and they're asking you to help them, and everything inside you wants to. But you know that every hand you extend might bring a dozen more tomorrow. Desperate outsiders aren't just a threat to your supplies, they're a threat to your peace, your routine, your morale, because even if you help them once, the relationship doesn't end there, and now you're being watched, talked about, maybe targeted. Because in a world where nobody has enough, someone who has anything starts to look like a target. And these aren't just strangers either. They might be neighbors, co-workers, old friends, people from your church, folks who never prepped a day in their life but remember that you did. And they'll show up at your door with stories, excuses, anger, guilt, and hope. And you're going to have to decide who you are in that moment. If you don't already have a plan for how to handle those visits, how to talk to them, how to turn them away, or how to give without drawing a crowd, then you're going to end up making emotional decisions when your life depends on thinking tactically. Collapse doesn't just bring danger, it brings desperation that wears a friendly face, and if you're not prepared for that quiet pressure at your gate, it'll seep in, and it'll unravel everything you worked for. We spend so much time training our hands, learning to shoot, to purify water, to tie knots, to fix engines. But most people never train their mind, and that's the part that gets tested first and hardest when everything goes to hell. Mental resilience isn't something you're born with. It's built, just like muscle. And if you haven't trained for isolation, boredom, conflict, fear, grief, or guilt, then those things are going to hit you like a brick when they show up. And in a long-term collapse, they absolutely will. You've got to practice the mental reps, walking through scenarios in your head, imagining the hard conversations, testing your own reactions, rehearsing what it's like to say no to someone in need or to confront someone in your group who's acting unstable. You've got to build habits now that keep your mind centered, things like prayer journaling, breathing routines, daily schedules, little anchors that keep you from drifting when the storm hits. And if you're part of a family or group, then you've got to help them build those anchors too. Because if you're the only stable one, you'll become the emotional load-bearing wall, and that pressure gets heavy fast. People think mental health is some soft, modern luxury, but it's not. It's survival. It's the only thing that keeps your hand from shaking when you need to lead, and your mouth from running when you need to stay silent. And if you don't build that discipline now, you'll find yourself breaking when you need to be the one holding the line. When it comes down to it, the most important part of your survival plan isn't your gear, or your location, or even your skills. It's the people around you, and whether or not they're ready to hold the line with you when things get real. You could have the best supplies in the world, but if your group turns on each other, or melts under pressure, you're not going to make it very far. And if your family doesn't understand the plan, or doesn't buy into it, then you're already vulnerable. That's why now is the time to build that inner circle, to have the conversations, to run the scenarios, to train together and talk about what really matters. Because once the power goes out and the trucks stop running and the chaos starts bubbling up, it's too late to start building trust. Prepping isn't a solo sport. Even if you're the only one doing it right now, your real job is to become the kind of person others will trust when everything falls apart, and to start building the kind of relationships that can weather more than just a storm. The people around you will either be your strongest asset or your biggest liability, and the difference depends entirely on the work you're doing right now. Not after the fact, not when it's already too late, but right now, while there's still time to shape what's coming. So here's the truth, the part most people won't say out loud. You can have a basement full of preps, 1,000 rounds of ammo, a bug-out bag in every car, and a 3-year food supply. But if you haven't prepared for what collapse does to people, to their minds, their morals, their motivations, then you've missed the one thing that actually determines whether you make it out or not. The real danger isn't always the looter at the door or the foreign threat on the news. It's the breakdown that starts quietly inside your group, your home, your head, and it grows in the cracks that most plans ignore. If you want to survive, really survive, you've got to prep for the human side, the emotional storm, the betrayals, the cries at the door, the moments when doing the right thing and doing the smart thing don't match up. And that takes more than gear. It takes heart, it takes discipline, and it takes courage. So if this video hit home for you, share it with someone you care about. Leave a comment below, and let's talk about how we can get more people thinking this way. Because the storm is coming, and it's not going to ask if your checklist was complete. It's going to test your will, your wisdom, and your people. And I want you ready for all of it.